And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I am your host, Kim Davis, and it is Tuesday, April the 12th. And, you know, obviously I have to start the show talking about what's happening in Minnesota. And no, not just what's happening with the Derek Chauvin trial, but yet another unarmed Black man fatally shot by police. Of course, there have been protests, understandably, in the streets. This is taking place in Minnesota, about 10 miles from where the Chauvin trial is underway. And we continue to ask ourselves, like, how did we get here again? I think we know how we got here, but I think the bigger question becomes, what do we do? So I really want to start the show there because I think it's just that important. And obviously, sending condolences and prayers to the family of Daunte Wright. Can't even imagine, right? What they must be experiencing. And we have this conversation so many times, over and over again. But I just think it's important that we can never let it become normalized. We can't say, it's just happening again and not pick a pause and mention it. So that's why I thought it was really important to start today's show talking about it. It's way too important to not stop and say, listen, we're still here. And so I'm going to let you hear from a couple of voices about that. And feel free to weigh in if you have thoughts that you want to share about that as well. So I'm going to start with just kind of the news of it and a reporter whose work I really respect, who is Yamiche Alcindor, who is the White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour and does a lot of work on MSNBC. So she was really kind of bringing an update from the White House on yesterday. And so let me let you first hear from Yamiche.
Yamiche, up front, what's the reaction today from the White House?
Well, President Biden says that he has seen this video and that it was troubling, and that he is waiting to see what the investigation yields. He said that he's praying for this family, hasn't reached out to the family yet. But the White House, on a bigger note, also says that they're pushing to get this George Floyd Justice and Policing Act through Congress. So they're saying that they're very, very focused on policing, very, very focused on trying to solve this issue. But I have to tell you, Nicole, in watching this video of Dwayne Wright, a 20-year-old being shot by this police officer, it is the nightmare that America, and especially African Americans in this country, are living and experiencing over and over and over again. This shooting reminds me so much of the shooting of Oscar Grant that was on New Year's Day in 2009, where a police officer shot that young man in California on a train station. That police officer served about 11 months in prison. I interviewed the family of Oscar Grant and his children. To this day, when they see police officers, they duck because they are so traumatized by what happened to Oscar Grant. And here we are again, watching another young man lose his life. In this trial, we've watched George Floyd die over and over again from so many different angles. And here we are again now having to watch another person die. I just think that there is, of course, this robust conversation happening about what the change needs to be. But there are just people traumatized all over this country, some of them taking to the streets, but some of them crying, some of them young children that are having to watch this. And I think that also needs to be a big part of this conversation that I think is a harder thing to solve because we as a nation are just, I think, personally, and talking to the people, tired of watching Black people die at the hands of police on video in this way. It's almost unbearable. It's devastating at this point.
David, Yamiche used the word unbearable. It is unbearable. And if insanity is doing the same thing over and over, we as a country are certifiable.
Yeah, Nicole, violent intentions lead to violent problems. I say that because even if you accept what the police chief says, he claims this is an accident. It occurs in the context of people trying to force individuals to submit. It's difficult for me because as I watch this video, sitting here right now, I can think of 3 times I've been forced to get out of my vehicle for a minor traffic stop that didn't even result in a ticket. I've been stopped many more times than that, but 3 times I've been ordered out of my car. and the way that police officers tend to behave. If you don't comply quickly enough, if you don't move fast enough, if you ask any questions, they respond with violence. That's what links George Floyd's case to the lieutenant in Virginia, to the case that we're discussing right now. And so these violent intentions, the police resort to violence too quickly, and when they use violence, they use far too much of it. I know we hear the argument all the time that they have to make split-second decisions, but it occurs so infrequently. At some level, we're going to have to re-examine why these things keep occurring and why we keep allowing it to happen, because it reminds me most of something one of the witnesses in George Floyd's case said, and that was Mr. McMillan yelled at him when he was cuffed. You can't win. And if people truly believe that, that's when society starts to combust, and it's up on leadership to make sure that they provide people with hope by ensuring them that justice will be served.
Hey, thanks for watching.
So that was a report from obviously from MSNBC, but I just thought it was important to give some context to it. There's so much, right? There's still the rioting going on. I say rioting. Let me change the language of protests, because that's what's happening. Yesterday, the Timberwolves and the Nets postponed their game in the wake of the shooting. I believe the hockey game was also postponed. It's just the NBA said it made its decision after consulting with the Timberwolves, as well as locals from the state and local area. And basically, I'll share with you the NBA statement. They said they announced that in light of the tragic events in Minneapolis area yesterday, tonight's game between the Brooklyn Nets, and this was on yesterday, and the Minnesota Timberwolves at Target Center has been postponed. The decision to postpone was made by the NBA after consultation with the T-Wolves organization and local and state officials. Our thoughts remain with the family and friends of Dante Wright during this difficult time. So it really happened. That postponement came within 90 minutes of the Twins announcing that they had postponed their Monday matinee against the Red Sox. Both the Timberwolves and Twins are playing at home. So both of those games on yesterday were postponed. Those games could be made up today. As far as I know, it seems at this point the games will be played today. We won't really know until much later. Of course, this is another case of an unarmed Black man being shot, fatally shot, for a traffic stop, right? For a traffic stop. I heard someone say on one of the shows, perhaps late last night, that there was no reason, like, even if he got in his car and drove away, it's a traffic stop. You have his information, just go pick him up. Like, this is not, a traffic stop should not result in a death sentence. And then for the officer who has been on the force for 26 years and is also someone who trains officers to say it was an accident, she didn't grab her taser. There's so much here. But what we do is we come back to the fact that we're having a conversation about another unarmed Black man being fatally shot by a police officer, about the aggressive nature, the violent, aggressive nature that police have when they stop Black people, especially Black men, for traffic stops. We saw what happened in Virginia. So for the people who are wondering why that Army lieutenant was in this car saying, "I'm afraid," this is why. Because we've seen this too many times than not. So I wanted to open the show with that, because we can never let this become commonplace, and we can never let it get to a point where it happens so much we just kind of keep moving on. No, we have to always stop. It is not okay. And so if you haven't pressured your legislators, because there's so much that we should be pressuring them about, voting rights, the George Floyd Policing Act, yes, we send people to office. We've got to give them some help to get some legislation passed that can, curb or stem some of this. I don't even know what the right word is, but I know that it is not okay. And that's what's most important. And that we have to keep doing something. And doing something is a little bit of everything. It's being mad, it's feeling whatever you feel, it's being in the streets, and it's protesting, but it's also putting pressure on legislators all across the country. If you're in Texas, if you're in Minnesota, if you're in Georgia, they need to hear from you. They need to hear from all of us about things that matter, about voting, about policing, about healthcare, whatever the things matter to you and to your community and your family, let them hear from you, because otherwise we just paying them and they getting a free ride and they ain't getting nothing done. And that's not okay. So I wanted to start the show with that. And I also want to let you hear from Greg Popovich, who, is not a guy that, a coach, the Spurs head coach. He doesn't really interviews. He doesn't say a whole lot. The one topic that you can really get him to give you some context and to really, I say context, he provides that, but to really elaborate is when it comes to issues like this. Good morning, Ellen Davis Johnson, my sister, who celebrated a birthday last week, and probably is still kind of celebrating. So happy birthday again. Good morning, Kim Edwards Williams. Good to see you, my friend, my sister. Always good to see you. And good morning, LaWanda Phillips, my godmother. It's all family and friends so far. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk. Popovich was asked some questions last night after the game about basketball, which he didn't have a lot to, he answered in typical Pop fashion. But when he was asked about yet another incident like this, here's his response. Just trying to avoid that little promo, but so be it.
Good to see you. How did you wrap your head around yesterday's events in Minnesota with another police officer shooting and killing another unarmed Black person?
This is after the lieutenant was stopped. Before that, the Army officer, lieutenant. It's just makes you sick to your stomach. It's how many times does it have to happen? And as sick to our stomachs as we might feel, that individual's dead. He's dead, and his family is grieving, and his friends are grieving, and we just keep moving on as if nothing's happening. It's, I've said it before. I think we're already in the process of being Rome. It's over unless we find some leadership and some common sense and some people that can steer us in the right direction. It's all connected. It's the same, feeling we have with guns and the massacres. We see what's happening with policing and young Black men, middle-aged Black, doesn't matter, Black men, and some other people of color. And with the massacres of our children, it's the same thing. It goes on, and everybody says, well, when's it going to be enough? Of course I don't have those answers, but the people who continually fight to maintain that status quo are not good people.
I think that's a good place to end it. The people who fight to maintain status quo are not good people, right? If you are somebody who is fighting to say, yeah, they're massacres, but we should be able to have our assault weapons. What is that about? Why do you need that? Well, if he would just comply. Listen, if you're somebody who that's your comment, I'm going to ask you to just unfollow me, and because don't say that. That's almost a trigger for me. What does it mean to comply? Not a lack of compliance. There should not be a sentence of death. And we also have to get to the place where police officers are not judge and jury on the spot. That is just not okay. And it is not enough to say it was an accident. She yelled taser, but she grabbed her 9mm instead. So what can you do? I'm really big about what do we do? What steps can we take? Let your legislators, let your congressional people, let your senators hear from you. I live in Texas. Both of my senators are Republicans and all on board with all kinds of foolishness. I still let them hear from me because even though they're not my choice, They are my representatives, and they work for all of us. They make nice salaries. I'm not, you do the work, get up, get paid, but you need to do the work. And the work is not just falling in line with a group of people because of a party affiliation. The work is serving the people, and we are the people. So let them hear from you. This is not okay. We're not going to ever let it be normalized. And we're going to make them feel the pressure that we are here. And yes, you're in office, but it's going to be uncomfortable. Ted Cruz and John Cornyn and whatever state you're in, whoever your people are, it is not okay to keep trying to just not do any work because it's a Democrat in office. That is so ridiculous. I think you should resign and let somebody else have that almost $200,000 a year salary and those great benefits, right? Who's willing to actually do some work and not just fall in line. It's been happening far too long. And so I just want to remind all of us that we do have something we can do. So mobilize, be educated, pick up the phone. If you're watching my show today, you know how to use a phone or a computer. You can sit at the same place that you're finding me. You can find them. You can send them you can call their office. You can email their office. You can leave a message. You can do any number of things, but don't just be mad, because being mad is not enough. We are, we will just stay mad because nothing's going to change if we don't force it to change. So when people like Popovich speak out, like he will talk, and that interview went on for about another 3 minutes, right? That he'll talk about. He's not going to have a whole lot to say about X's and O's on the game. He's going to answer your questions because, by his contract of being an NBA head coach, he has to do that. He's a little surly in that regard, but talk about this. He will sit and share with you his thoughts because that is what matters. Not that obviously being a basketball coach doesn't matter. That's what he's done his entire career. But my point is, we have to not be silent and to not normalize it. So there's just no way I could start a show out without talking about what's happening in Minnesota. And I haven't really talked much about the Derek Chauvin trial. And for those of you who are calling it the George Floyd trial, it's not the George Floyd trial. He is not on trial. It is a trial because he's dead and he was murdered. So it is the Derek Chauvin trial. And it's just too much to watch all day for me because I do, run a business, but I do read and get the highlights to find out what's happening later. And so 10 miles from where that trial is taking place, this happens. And, it's just all too much. So let your legislators hear from you. Speaking of people being heard from, we know what's happened in Georgia. We know that the Major League Baseball pulled out because of the voter suppression laws that the Georgia the Georgia legislator voted to approve, and of course the governor signed it. And now there are corporate CEOs around because they're feeling the pressure and the heat, saying, "Hey, we need to do something. This isn't okay. We don't." Everybody should have the right to vote, right? We should make it easier, not more difficult. What we know is that there's been no problem with voter protection and integrity. The problem really is with suppression. And so that's happening in Georgia. Yesterday, Will Smith and Apple pulled out. They were going to shoot a movie in Georgia. They pulled that movie from Georgia. And I realized people like Stacey Abrams, who, look, all hail to Stacey Abrams, and others who are on the ground in Georgia are not advocating boycotts because it impacts the local people and the local community and in terms of small businesses and many people of color who benefit from that work. But I don't really know what the answers are. I understand the move. And here's what I will also say is that could some of those moves, I live in Texas, some of the legislation that has been enacted, like the anti-trans bill here in Texas, could that get the Final Four pulled from Houston? I don't know. But I do believe it's not going to stop in Georgia, because if the real issue is There's some stuff happening around this country and laws that are in place that are discriminatory, that are not inclusive enough, and we're not going to take our business there, then Texas could also be, people in Texas should be aware, because Texas could very well be next, right? In terms of, losing some of these opportunities that people get super excited about having because of what it means for the economy and the whole 9 yards. So I'm just saying, figure out where you are and let somebody hear from you. Okay. We are in very tenuous times, and the power is in the activity and the action, and it is not in being upset and inactive. So I'm encouraging you to be active and find out what that means for you. But first and foremost, be educated about it, right? Know the information, know who to contact. Maybe your thing is, there's so much happening, Kim, I want to focus on what's happening on the school boards. Then do that. You don't have to do all the things, but if all of us do something, then everything will get done. Find out the place that you want to fight. If it's for education, if it's for the fact that you shouldn't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to have for your child to get a good education in the state of Texas, and that's what your fight is, then let that be it. But do something. Don't just be mad. All right. So that's how I wanted to start the show. And I guess spend the first part encouraging you. And what we do here on Talk Talk, give you some things to do, some actions to take, some action items, right? Here's some things a call to action, if you will. And so that's my call to action for the first part of the show. In terms of what's happening in the world of sports, it is business as usual. The Astros, of course, are playing at home. They've lost 3 in a row, but it's early. Don't worry about it. They're going to be okay. Last night, AJ Hinch, the former Astros manager, who was, of course, fired after the cheating scandal in January of 2020. It seems like that was so long ago. Is the manager of the Detroit Tigers. And so after serving his suspension, after his 1-year suspension was over, 3 days later, he was hired as a manager of the Tigers. And the Astros last night played a tribute video to him. The fans gave him a standing ovation, and he tipped his hat. And then they went on to beat the Stros 6-2. So the beating the Stros part's not good, but I'm okay with the rest of it. AJ Hinch led this team, and despite his whatever shortcomings and role he may have played, whether it was by omission or not, he has, he served a suspension, and he's apologized for it, and now he's back at work. So, and that's what's happening in baseball. And basketball, of course, the Rockets are still struggling. But listen, this Rockets team, you've heard me say, you are what you're okay. You are what your schedule, what your record says you are. Okay. So I'm not going to do they're not as bad as, no, the record says that they are not very good. Okay. And they're not right now. I was trying to pull up the games for me. So they lost last night at home to the Phoenix Sun, which we know the Phoenix Sun is one of the hottest teams in the league. The Phoenix Sun are 38-18. The Rockets are, no, that's not right. Was that Sunday? Monday. Okay, the Rockets are 14-40. They lost 120-126. These guys are playing hard, right? They're fighting. It's not enough yet. We see that. In the Western Conference, the Suns right now, the Phoenix Sun, they have the best record in the Pacific. If we look at the playoffs right now, in terms of the Western Conference, they are number 2 behind Utah. So here's what it looks like in the West. You have Utah with a 40-14 record. Of course, Utah has the best record in all of the NBA. So they're the top seed in the West as of today. I mean, the season's not over yet, but they're 40-14. Phoenix is in the 2 spot, a game and a half behind. Then the Clippers are 3.5 games behind Utah. It's Clippers 3, Denver 4, the Lakers 5, Portland 6, Dallas 7, and Memphis is right there at the 8th spot. They're 2 games over 500, but it's super close, right? They're right behind. They're barely above San Antonio. San Antonio is 26 and 26. Golden State's 26 and 28. So those last couple spots are still in play. So that's what's happening in the West. In the East, it's Milwaukee at the top seed. Brooklyn's a half game behind them. And then there's Philadelphia with the top seed. Brooklyn 2, Milwaukee 3, Atlanta 4, Miami 5, Charlotte 6, Boston 7, and New York. The Knicks are 8, right? Who would think that we'd be talking about the New York Knicks? So that's what's happening in basketball. The Houston Rockets were in action last night, and they are in action again on Wednesday night. Tomorrow night, they play host to the Pacers. Last night, again, they lost at home. They lost on the road to the Sun, and they're back home tomorrow night for 2 games. It's Wednesday night, they play host to Indiana, and then on Friday night, they host the Denver Nuggets. So after last night's game, I'm going to let you hear from Armani Brooks, but I wanted to give you some numbers in terms of a box score. So Armani Brooks came off the bench. He had 14 points in 14 minutes, was 5 of 6 from the field, and is really starting to feel his way. He went to, University of Houston, and this is him after last night's game. The loss to the Phoenix Sun.
Good. We'll go ahead and start it. Mark Berman.
Hey, Armani, how are you?
I'm doing good, my man. How you doing?
Good. So how does this feel when you look back on 14 minutes, 14 points, your first game out there like this, in this situation? What's happening inside you right now?
Honestly, I'm still upset we lost because we got within, striking distance, coming back, making a comeback. But, it feels good to just be able to get out there and just get some experience, get some minutes under my belt, and, try to help the team make a run to come back and get this W.
Is it what you thought it would be?
Yeah, it is. Everything just kind of went well. My teammates were playing unselfish. Everybody was looking to make the right plays, and we got out there and we were just executing what coach told us to do. And we made that run, we made a push. It just wasn't enough to get it done tonight.
Jonathan Fagan.
You guys haven't had almost any practice time since you signed. How valuable is it that you were able to show this team what you bring?
Yeah, not being able to practice, your teammates don't really know who you are as a player. They just kind of can go off word of mouth. But being able to get out there and just show them that I'm capable of, playing at this level, or at least, producing some, is a great motivational thing. And it's going to keep me going, and it's going to just continue to build confidence within myself and my teammates.
Did you know?
Yeah, I did. I was, it's just years and years of preparation, and just finally being able to go out there and show it is, it's a great feeling.
Thank you.
That was Armani Brooks after last night's loss to the Phoenix Sun. He had 14 points off the bench. The Rockets, of course, Christian Wood led with 25 points in 34 minutes. And then, Kevin Porter Jr., who continues to just grow in that role, is finished with 22 points in 40 minutes. So he had 14 assists. So he's really he plays a forward role. He's really growing more as a guard, and he talked a little bit about that after the game last night as well. So, good to listen. This Rockets team is young, and they've got a future. Freddie says the Rockets could have as many as 3 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. The Rockets GM is a pretty smart guy, and they should be fine. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, whether they just, use all those picks, or whether they package the pick and a player to get a veteran who's ready to, a young veteran who can come and play right now. I don't really know what their plan is. I think they're figuring out. I think they're using this season. Once you lose 2 MVPs, right? You lose Westbrook before the season, and you lose Harden at the very beginning. And it's a very different look and feel for the team in terms of ability and talent, in terms of veterans and leadership. Of course, you trade away PJ Tucker. He wanted out of here. And so I do think you're right, Freddie. I think the future of this team is bright, and it's difficult for some to not get cynical about where the Rockets team is right now. You had to know that when their personnel changed so dramatically that they were not going to be in the hunt really for any kind of championship, and definitely not a playoffs, and definitely not a championship run. I mean, they're not that team, but what are they building? They're getting to know who they are and who they have. And some of these young players give you a lot of reason to be optimistic about the future of this Houston Rockets organization. So you're right. Freddie talks about Jamal Murray. The Nuggets lost him last night to a torn ACL when they were playing the Warriors. That's a big loss for them. And so has it come back? I know they were going to do an MRI. I haven't seen yet this morning. And if maybe that is that has been confirmed, I'm not sure. If that's the case, he's obviously done for the season. And good morning to our resident legal expert, Charles Lamar Drayton. Thank you for always being a part of the show. So one of the things that's also happened since we were last together last week is that Rusty Hardin held a press conference. He, of course, filed some motions last week to get some of the accusers, some of the Jane Does in the civil lawsuits, to get the names, for them to have to come forward with their names. And so I had somebody ask me the other day, why have there only been, I think they're up to 13 now? Because each one of those cases is filed separately. And so it has to be, and Charles will correct me if I'm not wrong on this, it has to be a separate motion for each suit, because they're separate suits. It's not one case, one suit with a lot of people. So it requires motions separately. And so for the first time, really last week, Rusty held a news conference and addressed a few things. I'm going to let you hear a little bit from Rusty just because we have not. And he also even talks about why we had not heard from him prior to last Friday after going to court. Wait a minute. That's not what we want. What happened? Let me see here. Okay, so I'm not sure what happened, but let me pull it up again for you. I don't know what that was about. You gotta love technology. Maybe because I put it, let's see if we can make it work this time. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. I appreciate y'all coming, and I hope we don't take up too much of your Friday afternoon time. This has been an incredible ordeal for Deshaun. We toyed with the idea of having him here today, so I indicated to some people he might be, and we made a decision just a little while ago that it really wouldn't add anything because I wasn't going to allow him to answer any questions. And I think most of you all understand that. You've got investigations going on, and not just police departments have been asked to look at it, but the NFL, there may be other agencies that look at it. And my malpractice insurance wouldn't handle me allowing him to talk right now, okay? So if that was the case, then why else have him just sitting here listening to us talk about him? But that is what we're going to do, and about this case. I want to start out with you, and then I'm going to ask some of the people that have been working on the case with me to offer some observations. But I think why they're really relevant is you folks have heard read a bunch of petitions. You have read some salacious allegations. You've seen at least two conferences press conferences by Mr. Busby. You've seen, I think we counted 40 Facebook posts, 20-something Instagram posts, and so on. A couple of press conferences. And we've been noticeably quiet. Before I start with some observations and ask others, just so you know who's up here, I'll start right here with Leticia Quinones. Leticia is a member of our firm while also having her own firm. She's of counsel to our firm because we do a lot of cases together and is a member of our firm. She also has her own separate firm. We have, over the last 2 to 3 years, not only become very close friends, but involved in a lot of cases together. And now you'll see she is listed as an of counsel member of our firm. Rachel Lewis is from LA.
Okay, so I'm going to move past some of that, not because they're not important.
Folks, the media. I don't think there's any secret in Houston that I've probably, of the people I know and live, probably been the most strongest advocate of what y'all do that I know. Many of you have heard me say in other forums, in my lifetime professionally, first time I was probably ever quoted in '77, and I want the audience to know this because I don't join in the cynicism about the media. Even when we get criticism, even when we don't want to answer the questions you want to ask, even when we get upset with an article or broadcast. Fact is, I've been doing this as far as publicly being asked questions by the media since 1977. I'm not happy about that figure because you can do the math after that. And since 1977, to this day as I stand here, I have never been misquoted, not by a single member of the media. I have been quoted saying some things I wished I hadn't said, but I said them, okay? And I didn't say they were off the record. I've never had anybody violate the off the record rule. So I stand before you as somebody who's not criticizing the media historically and not criticizing now. Y'all have done your job. You have not been unfair to us. And the reason you haven't been able, it has gone so badly for us in the media, is because we have not been comfortable talking to you. So y'all have done, I mean, everybody in this room or anybody that's on the Zoom call all knows that everybody in the media that I'm aware of actively and aggressively sought to get our side, and we refused. So I've been accused many times in the past of jumping in front of cameras too quickly or whatever, and some of you are not used to the fact that we're not talking to you. And the reason is we don't know what happened for sure. And you've heard me talk all along here about how in the world are we supposed to respond when we don't know the names of the people. And I've seen some talking heads that say, well, I can find out who did it, right? I mean, they just go look and they match up dates and try to figure out. That's not what it's supposed to be about. We're not supposed to have to guess who is accusing us of doing something wrong. And I have been, and you've seen our pleadings, I have been guided throughout this by a strong fear. What if we disagreed with a woman and her petition, and it turned out we were wrong about who it was? You and everybody else would rightly scour us for that. So we have been involved in something that I'm not sure y'all recognize how unique it is. And what's really important is to understand the dangers of what's happened these last 2 weeks. Not just the dangers to Deshaun Watson, but the dangers to anyone in which an opponent decides to try to ruin because it will help their case. Because if you stop and think about it, let's assume for a moment that given the rapidity of social media, that someone decides that it's to their advantage, whether it gives them advantage in litigation, whether it gives them advantage in anything else, to go out and just lambaste the target of their ire and lambaste somebody that the media and the public care about that has a reputation so that they will get the coverage they want. Let's assume for a moment, now I'm not naming names or suggesting anything, but let's assume for a moment someone decides that it's to his or her advantage to be a proponent of a particular social issue or a particular hot button issue, and they pick a target to try to become associated with that activity. And they give all these self-serving social media posts about how wonderful they are and how the champion they are of this or that. And then they make these horribly salacious allegations anonymously. They file a petition, But the other side's answer date is not until the first Monday, 20 days after the first lawsuit's filed against them. In the meantime, the object of it doesn't know who it was. How do I know? How do I prepare? What do I do? And then people who are sympathetic to the social issue being raised say, well, what's the big deal? You can find out. What we heard today in the courts so far, and other judges still to rule, and I don't want to anticipate what they're going to say, but so far, uniformly in 13 of the cases filed against him, 2 different judges have said, you need to tell them who you are. And actually, Mr. Busby, as you may know this morning, halfway through the hearing, said that he was ready to amend as soon as he got all his people. That is something he could have done 2 weeks ago. And all of this howling about us, who is it? We could have filed answers before now. We could have fully investigated. And while we were investigating, our biggest fear was being wrong about somebody.
Okay, I hope that's better. Thank you for that. I appreciate you guys always letting me know stuff I need to know. I hope that I am back. But yes, I thought it was important to let you hear from Rusty Hardin because we had not, and so that he could talk about why you hadn't heard from Deshaun's side. He talked about why not have Deshaun present. You definitely can't have him answering questions. That would be almost legal malpractice, if you will. But so Tony Busby has had I don't know 60 or so cases. So hey Patrick Trahan, so are you saying I'm still frozen or am I back? Let's see. I'm going to reload one more time and see if it does. Oh, I am. Okay. So it looks like I should be back on my end. You guys tell me if you can, if it is still frozen or if you can see it. You gotta love technology. All right, I'm gonna operate as though I am back. And one of you guys give me a thumbs up if you are able to hear me. Okay, so there we go. Jacqueline says I can see you. Okay, so thank you for that, Jackie Pierce. But yes, so Tony Busby has made more than like 60, if that was from what Rusty was just sharing, different social media posts, has had 2 press conferences. Thank you, Pat Trahan. And so really what Rusty is saying is that they weren't going to come out and say anything until they basically had something to say. And because it's an investigation, you don't know what's happened. But one of the things he talked about, he went on in that news conference, and I think I've talked about it here on this show. I didn't want to I don't know where he talked about it. It was about another 4 minutes in, and I didn't want to take that much time. but about the use of Instagram. He also talked about the number of massages that people are generally shocked by. But if you talk about a player having 2 or 3 massages a week, which is pretty commonplace for them, so then over the course of a year, that's a lot. If you talk about, if you say 3 massages a week, so if that's 12, and what's that, 12 in a month? Um, so you could be anywhere from 140 to 150 in a year. And during the pandemic, when spas were shut down, I mean, of course, you guys have heard me say here, I don't know what happened. So this is not me caping from Deshaun, but I think it is important to add some perspective to the things that naturally make a person go, why so many massages? And so it is not uncommon for these ball players to get 2 or 3 massages a week. So that's one thing. And he also talked about the use of Instagram. I don't know how, depending on how old you are, because I mean, I don't use Instagram as much as obviously the millennial or Gen Z or whatever that group is. I do use it some for my business, but there are some who communicate exclusively on Instagram. They do all of their business on Instagram, and that's not uncommon. So it doesn't mean that what you're always doing there is the right thing. I'm not saying that, but I just want to offer some context to the use of Instagram. That's where they do their business, and there are a lot of people who do their business exclusively. And I'm not just talking about massage therapists. I'm talking about various businesses, some consultants, some, uh, in the food industry. I mean, there are a number of people who do their business, have built their business, are building their business, and use Instagram to communicate and build it and grow. So those are some things that Rusty Hardin also talked about. And then he talked some more about Deshaun and got into that. But those are some of the key things that I wanted to share and mention from his press conference that really stood out to me and that he addressed. And as he said, finding out who the people are who are accusing you is incredibly important to be able to mount a defense and do your investigation and prepare a solid case. And so, to the point, as of Friday, in 13 cases, 2 different judges agreed, and so those women will have to come forward with their names. And as he said, then Tony Busby, halfway through the hearing, said, "Oh well, yeah, no, I'm ready to do, I guess ask the people or bring the names or things that, as Rusty Hardin said, he could have done 2 weeks ago." So it is a lot of a show, in my opinion. I've said it on television in terms of Tony Busby.